On August 9th, 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed by a police officer. This incident set off a series of protests, starting in his hometown of Ferguson, Missouri, and being echoed all across the nation. Night after night, armed forces were unleashed upon everyday citizens who were fed up with the lack of accountability and transparency within an institution that seemed to consistently abuse their power, murdering and imprisoning their friends, family, and neighbors, with little on-scene evidence to justify these actions. Michael Brown's death was not caught on tape, and the officer responsible for killing this young man was not charged, due to lack of evidence on the crime scene. Here is where we see a widespread push for body cameras to become mandated parts of police officers' uniforms all over the US. This push came from civil rights activists, the rational general public, and our favorite DJ next to Cody Ko, Barack Obama. Requiring police to wear body cameras seems like a no-brainer solution to increasing transparency between the police and the public. But is it that simple? Black Lives Matter and the ACLU weren't the only ones pushing for body cameras. In fact, police agencies had been asking for money for body cameras for years prior to the killing of Michael Brown. So, how were the police punished for unjust killings of unarmed kids? Well, they were given $75 million to buy a bunch of cameras and do shooting simulators. You see, prior to the Ferguson protests, small companies who were creating this body camera technology were marketing these devices as tools to better officer safety, increase evidence collection, better public trust, be more cost efficient, and also improve police accountability. And let me tell you, these companies like Axon and Vertra make a shit ton of money every year selling this technology to us, considering our taxpayer dollars continue to fund one of the largest expansions of government surveillance in history. Okay, so how are these accountability tools a bad thing? To answer this question, I will be using the framework provided by someone who knows a lot more about this than I do. In The Body Camera, The Language of Our Dreams, and on episode 208 of the podcast Citations Needed, titled How U.S. Media Repackages Pro-Police Policies as Reform, Alex Kerktasanis examines how body cameras have become instruments that shape public perception and control the narrative of police-civilian interactions. Kerktasanis discusses how the body camera, despite its potential for transparency, is not a neutral tool. Police departments control the context and the release of body camera footage, which allows them to frame the footage in a way that serves their interests. Police body cam footage channels are wildly popular on YouTube, and often amplify this controlled language by presenting the footage in ways that either reinforces law agents' legitimacy or justifies their actions. For example, the editing of body cam footage is frequently used to omit the moments leading up to or following an incident, only offering a narrow view of the encounter. This careful selection of footage can create a biased story that makes it seem like officers are only reacting to threats or protecting the public, without giving the whole picture of what happened. By presenting some actions in a way that makes police officers look like they're just protecting themselves or others, channels like Midwest Safety, Code Blue Cam, and Long Crime Network create a simple, one-sided view of complicated situations. Similarly to mainstream news media, these channels are uploading body camera footage that they think will get the most views and engagement. This adds an additional layer of bias. They upload footage that they think the public will find the most enthralling, or that reinforces their own individual narratives about certain groups of people because that gets clicks. For example, the internet loves to see young, drunk, entitled girls getting arrested for DUIs. So that's what these channels post a lot of when it comes to DUI footage, and that's what the YouTube algorithm pushes. This might make one think that on a broad scale, young girls drive under the influence at greater rates than other groups. But in fact, young men are arrested for drunk driving at far greater rates than women. For every one female drunk driver, there are 4 male counterparts. By highlighting these arrests over other ones, these channels create a skewed perception that doesn't match the actual statistics, influencing public attitudes and perpetuating gender stereotypes. This is a good example of how these channels, while not always intentionally misleading, can perpetuate false impressions that are rooted in things like gender and race biases. Additionally, these channels very rarely show police in a negative light. I went through Midwest Safety's 25 most recent videos, and only one of them had evidence of people condemning officers' actions in the top 10 comments. Even when they do show police wrongdoings, their tricky titles and selective editing result in viewers often siding with the officers from the get. and vilifying victims of police misconduct. Character Stannis provides us with a few critical thinking questions that we can ask ourselves when watching body camera footage, like, why are the police in that specific neighborhood in the first place? Are armed forces necessary to respond to a wide variety of public problems? And my personal favorite, why are police only enforcing some laws against some people some of the time? To give an example of how we can apply these critical thinking questions, we're going to watch a video from Midwest Safety titled, When Teens Outnumber the Cops. Right off the bat, I want you to notice the title and what kind of narrative that impresses upon the viewer before they have even started watching the video.
Where do you live at? Where do you live? What building?
Come on now.
No, what building do you live in?
Officers respond to a call of a fight between about 20 teens. Some of these teens are known to have an extensive criminal history.
Okay, so the police are responding to a call about a fight that broke off in a neighborhood between a bunch of children. Something that piques my interest right off the bat is how they mentioned that several of the kids already had an extensive criminal history. So the police are not coming into this matter unbiased. They already know some of these kids from them being in the criminal justice system. And I think that's very apparent in the way that they treat these children.
This ain't I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna get
Come on, what you doing that for?
Well, because it's called loitering and prowling and you're obstructing.
Come on.
Loitering and prowling seems like a really weird thing to charge a child with. It's vaguely defined as suspicious activity that might lead to criminal behavior. This vague definition leaves a lot of room for officers to interpret seemingly regular teenage behavior as criminal. This is important to consider with our last question of some laws some of the time against some people. I don't believe that white children who were caught, fighting, they weren't actually caught, but white children who were called on for fighting, it's so hard for me to believe that they would immediately be arrested under the charges of loitering and prowling without further context of the situation.
Doing that for? I just came by here. He ain't got nothing to do with that. He just got school.
Who are you?
I'm his cousin.
Immediately arresting a child for running up to his family member who he sees as being unjustly arrested is also a really weird way to treat children, in my opinion.
Miss Cousin, I ain't do nothing. I just got over here. You can take me. I got my phone to myself. Come on. Hey, no, put your hands.
You about to go to jail too.
Okay, so here's where the interpretation of a complex situation gets really difficult. Right off the bat, when you watch that clip, it looks like this girl just runs up to the police officer and tackles him. But if you go back and watch it more slowly, it becomes a lot more unclear of what actually happened. One more time. It's so... So this goes back to body camera footage creating a simple one-sided narrative of complex situations. It's unclear to tell if she was intending to assault the officers or if she was running up trying to be with her brother and the police officer kind of threw her out of the way. I'm not saying she should have been acting in that way. That's not the point. I'm saying that it's unclear and people are drawing a lot of judgments based off of this evidence when we don't really know what was going on. I also want to point out that it seems like the police officers are kind of inciting a lot of this violent and reactionary behavior from children. Going to point out again that these are children When they're coming in and grabbing whatever young black man they see and putting him in handcuffs, that creates a response from their family members who have underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes because they are literally children. I don't think it's fair to just condemn this young woman's behavior without ignoring the context that these police officers are creating with their presence and actions.
Hey, I'm gonna back it up. Back it up.
It's my big sister, please. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I don't know what's my big sister. Me, bro. My big sister, bro. Please don't do nothing.
Take me out these handcuffs. Get in the car. Step away.
Big sister.
Step away.
For what? I ain't doing shit. Let's get him
Lord, I
out.
can
So that's our second detainment under the guise of loitering, prowling, and obstruction. Keep in mind that the police officers were called here to break up a fight, is what I thought. And they did that as soon as they showed up on the scene. But I think it's interesting that so far no one has been charged with anything related to fighting.
We just game over here. When I get my sister, get my sister the f off that ground. Or every time a mistake one of your officers. Oh God, ready?
Let's go.
Let me go. I ain't got no Wi-Fi, man. Let me go.
These angry, passionate, emotional responses are not just because these kids hate police for no reason. There is clear evidence of mistreatment of these children from the police, or just abusive treatment, whether or not it's actually malpractice, that I think creates this behavior that you see from these young people who constantly see themselves being abused by this system.
Where do you live at?
Oh, I was down here.
Then get out of here now. Where do you live at? You work here. All right, kick rocks. Where do you live at? All right, kick rocks.
You can see throughout this whole video the unprofessional behavior coming from the police officers. Like, they're dealing with children, and it seems like they're stooping to the level of immature child behavior. Like, telling all these kids to kick rocks is just, like, inappropriate and unprofessional, in my opinion.
That one. Which one? Red shirt?
Hey, okay, I get down, I get down.
Alright, I'm not sure why... Wait.
That one. Which one? Red shirt?
Okay. So for some reason, they have gone back to this kid in the red shirt. I don't know if someone told them that that was a kid who was originally involved in the fight, but they decided to target him.
Hey, okay, I get down. Call my mama.
Notice how the editing of the footage doesn't allow us to understand why they're throwing this young man back on the ground. We don't know what evidence they had to lead to another arrest because the video was very conveniently cut off right before that information was divulged to us.
Where do you live? Where do you live? Then leave. Where do you live? Put your hands out of your pants. Put your hands out of your pants. Where do you live at?
Don't touch me.
Where do you live at?
Huh?
Where do you live at?
Why you in my face, cousin?
Alright, cool. We're gonna get your hands up.
So I do believe that you are required to give kind of your information to the police if they ask, but keep in mind their guidance through the legal system from parents, friends, family, and the media has largely been, if the police are talking to you, don't say anything, because that could be incriminating towards you. So I think it's fair for these children to assume that they don't have to give their information to the cops, and it doesn't, at least from this video, it doesn't appear that the cops ever explained what obstruction actually is, and they're unclear of what the rules are. Because they're children, so just putting them all in handcuffs for not answering their questions, I think is kind of gross mistreatment of children.
Nobody did to y'all.
I didn't do nothing to you. Stand
Yes,
up.
you did.
All I did was put you in cuffs.
Bro, give me the off this ground and get me out of these cuffs and take me home. See how y'all just dropped your body down?
Calm down. Calm down. Calm down.
If you don't live here,
Just ignore us, please.
Yeah, just ignore me.
We will.
You want to go to jail? No. Probably because they was just fighting, man. They tripping. Come to the garden. They got her in the car, bro.
Step away.
Hey, I'm on the phone. Stop talking. Now you keep talking. Boy, just wait. Just wait till my daddy get out here, boy. I'm not so. You getting up? I ain't this. Y'all.
Man, shut up, man. Shut up.
Are you serious? Like, telling a child to shut up when you're arresting him is not only unprofessional, but I think it points to a bigger problem that we see with Black youth, in that society often sees them as grown when they are very much children and very much should be treated the same way that all children are. And this officer, with his tone and how all of the officers are treating these children, shows that they are not viewing them at the age that they are. They're viewing them as grown criminals, which is so damaging and just gross.
You alright?
You hear what?
You alright?
Man, he dangerous. Arrest him too.
Where do you live at? Where do you live at?
46.
Alright, you're about to come here and talk to me. Where do you live at?
I'm a man.
Good. You do have to talk to me. Watch me. Where do you live at?
I gotta answer your question.
Alright, then cool. We're going to handcuffs. Come on. Number 5. Called obstruction. Loitering and prowling.
It's also interesting, and this happens a few times in the video, where you see them asking the young woman questions and they don't really get arrested for not answering, but as soon as it is I actually don't know the gender of this kid, but as soon as it is a young, masculine appearing Black kid, they immediately put them in handcuffs and slap them with obstruction.
I can do this all day long.
Yeah, last time you talked to me, you said you were going to kill us all.
I didn't say that. So we can put one time out for.
So here's where we come back to that message in the beginning that stated that some of these kids had already had criminal histories, so they have a relationship with these police. And that bias is evident here when they ask those other girls these questions and they don't say anything, but as soon as they get to this kid who they have a negative history with, they're immediately slapping cuffs on him because he expressed anger towards them previously. Which, by the way, that they're treating everyone here, I think is somewhat justified.
Put me in handcuffs because I don't want to answer your questions.
That's called
So they're already assuming that he is a criminal because of that history. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the looking glass self-theory, but it basically states, and this is especially important with children, that the impression that you reflect upon other people is how they begin to view themselves and how they act in turn. If you're immediately treating these children as criminals, then that is the behavior that you are going to receive back, because they are beginning to view themselves as criminals and therefore cops as the enemy.
obstruction. And right now, loitering and prowling and obstruction.
Do you know the rule, love?
Do I know the rule? Yeah, I know the rule. I know the rule.
So explain it to them. They're fucking children. They don't know what that means.
You just put me in handcuffs.
So, absolutely, it's not a rule.
Let me know.
I'm not sure where you got that rule from, but that's not a rule.
I don't have to answer your question.
You're right, you don't have to answer my question. You can go in handcuffs. Now let's go.
I think that just backs up what I said earlier about them not having a clear understanding of the justice system because they're children, and the police not bothering to explain any of those rules like they might to other children.
Called loitering and prowling and obstruction. Have a seat. We need more cars.
Alright, now we're gonna skip to the end of the video. I mean, basically what happens, the property manager makes an appearance. She says that she is going to evict the people who do actually live there, which is really sad, and not helpful at all to these children's development and their livelihoods by getting them evicted and forcing displacement upon them. So just an example of the police and their actions not actually being restorative or helpful to the communities that they are claiming to serve. But if you go to the end, we can see what they were charged with. We're actually going to go back to that.
I talked to her dad. The paperwork will be sent to that address that they live at over in Iowa. Alright, so just wait for the court date. So I called the jail to see if they were going to take her, but the jail wasn't going to. That's literally the only reason.
Okay, so this is funny to me because it seems like they called the jail, and the jail, based off of whatever evidence they gave them, was like, that's not enough for us to imprison this child. I just think that's interesting.
It's not going over.
Kimura was charged with felony obstruction, loitering and prowling, and 2 counts of battery.
So it's unclear if that was battery on the officers. I'm assuming it was, and then obstruction and loitering and prowling.
Kimura was charged with possession of marijuana, obstruction, and loitering and prowling. The others were released to the care and custody of their parents.
So nobody was actually charged with the initial fight that the police officers were called to stop. Like I said, they stopped it just by showing up and having the kids scatter. The only reason that these kids were charged was because of the energy and atmosphere that the police created by their presence and behavior towards these children. And I think that gives big stop and frisk energy, especially for the marijuana charge. Like, the help versus harm that these police did in this situation is so unbalanced, and it's just sad. And I feel for these kids, and I think it's obvious why police presence is so upsetting and kind of incites this behavior from them that we saw in the video because of the way the police treat them and abuse them. Okay, so after watching that video, I want to bring up a point that I feel like might come up, or that comes to my head, of people saying it's not that deep, it's just entertainment. And I think this represents an overall tendency that we have to dismiss the serious of entertainment. And my argument is that it is that deep. The way in which media shapes our narratives about people in positions of power can determine whether or not those people are given more power. The narratives that we are made to believe about victims of police violence drive our voting strategies by skewing what we believe the most important issues are. When we view a victim as a perpetrator or criminal, it devalues their voice, their needs, and their struggles. Body cam footage channels and body cams in general can increase complacency, causing us to believe that police violence has gotten better and needs less of our attention. But it's not getting better. In 2023, we saw more police killings than we have in over a decade. Less than half of these killings were even captured on body cameras. And young Black people are still at the forefront of these police murders, being killed at disproportionate rates compared to Hispanic and white people. And while we as citizens are being killed more and more every single year, on-the-job police deaths are declining. And this makes sense. Body cameras were never meant to protect us. They were marketed and stand to serve to protect police first. Which I'm not pointing out to say that better police workplace safety is bad, because I don't believe that. I'm pointing it out because I feel like we've been lied to in order to give more money and power to police surveillance. I'm pointing it out in hopes that you, the viewer, rethink the purpose and effectiveness of body cameras and learn to assess footage from a more critical mindset. I want to give a big shout out to Alec Herkstanis. I highly recommend checking out his work if you want to learn more about this topic of police body camera footage, and if you want to learn more about the lies that mainstream media sells to us, you definitely need to check out the Citations Needed podcast. I also want to give a big shout out to the Citations Needed podcast because they inspired the origins of this video and drove many of the talking points that I used. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you learned something new or thought this was interesting, and let me know what topics that you'd like to see me cover next.